Imagine watching a catastrophe unfold, knowing exactly how it ends, but no one will listen to your warnings. That was Friedrich Hayek in 1944. As an Austrian economist, he watched Vienna's socialist experiments pave the way for the totalitarianism of Nazi Germany. Now, exiled in London, he was listening to British intellectuals enthusiastically planning a post-war state economy. He recognized exactly the same pattern. This book is not a dry academic text. It is a desperate personal warning written by someone who has already seen this movie and knows the terrifying ending. During the Second World War, the British intelligentsia developed a comforting yet fundamentally flawed narrative. They convinced themselves that the horrors of Nazi Germany were merely a reactionary capitalist movement designed to crush a rising working class. Hayek shattered this illusion completely. Drawing from his first-hand experience in Central Europe, he controversially argued that the totalitarianism of the Nazi regime was not a reaction against socialism, but rather the necessary and logical culmination of it. The push to organize society from the top down had originated with socialist intellectuals, and the totalitarian state simply perfected that centralization of absolute power. He had made this exact point to William Beveridge back in a 1933 memorandum, but by 1944 the illusion stubbornly persisted across British academic circles. Instead of seeing the danger, British thinkers truly believed they could adopt the heavily planned economy of totalitarian states while miraculously avoiding the accompanying political oppression. They thought they could cleanly separate economic control from political freedom. For Hayek, this was a dangerous, unprecedented fantasy. And yet, the intellectuals of 1944 truly believed democratic planning was possible. The argument is simpler than it sounds. Though its implications are profound, Hayek explained why economic planning mechanically destroys individual freedom, not through malice, but through logical necessity. To centrally plan an economy, a government must impose a single, definitive hierarchy of values on millions of citizens. Because democratic assemblies can never agree on a unified economic blueprint, they are eventually forced to delegate massive unchecked power to unelected experts and bureaucratic agencies. These central planners face an impossible task because the knowledge required to run an economy is dispersed in the minds of millions, making rational calculation impossible. Ultimately, whoever controls economic activity controls the means for all our ends. If the state dictates production, prices, and employment, it dictates life itself. You cannot separate economic control from political control, because directing the economy requires coercing individuals to fit the master plan. As Hayek noted, while a free market relies on the bailiff, the planned economy ultimately relies on the hangman. Here is what most people miss when they think about the dangers of a planned society. In his most famous chapter, Hayek explores exactly why the worst get on top. In a centrally planned system, democratic leaders eventually face a brutal, unavoidable choice. Either abandon their grand economic plan or disregard ordinary morals to forcefully implement it. Those who are scrupulous and hesitate to use coercion will inevitably fail. Those without scruples always outcompete them. To force massive compliance, a dictator needs a highly uniform group of supporters, which often means actively recruiting the docile, the gullible, and the ruthless. The leader must then appeal to the lowest common denominator, uniting the masses through a negative program based on the hatred of an enemy, whether that is a wealthy class or a foreign minority. The system actively rewards individuals willing to use intimidation, relentless propaganda, and state violence to execute the government's economic vision. Now here is the part that surprises most people about Hayek's philosophy. The fundamental distinction for him was not between state action and total inaction, but between the rule of law and discretionary power. The rule of law provides fixed, announced rules that apply equally to everyone, including the government. It operates exactly like a highway code, telling drivers to stay on the left so they do not crash, without dictating their ultimate destination. This predictable framework allows individuals to freely plan their own lives and investments. Economic planning, however, requires case-by-case decisions that depend on the shifting circumstances of the moment. Bureaucratic planners must constantly choose whose interests matter most, deliberately picking winners and losers in the marketplace. This arbitrary power inevitably transforms individuals into mere tools of the state, utterly destroying true equality before the law. When rules change constantly to achieve specific economic outcomes, the very concept of objective justice evaporates entirely. The impact of this short book was absolutely explosive, transforming an academic text into a formidable political weapon. Winston Churchill famously weaponized it during the 1945 British general election, warning voters that a Labour government would require some form of Gestapo to implement its plans. Clement Attlee fiercely fired back, dismissing Churchill's fears as the second-hand views of an Austrian professor. Meanwhile, John Maynard Keynes read the book on a boat crossing the Atlantic to the Bretton Woods Conference. Keynes wrote to Hayek, admitting he was morally and philosophically in deeply moved agreement with it. But Keynes pointed out a massive, practical flaw. He noted that Hayek gave no exact guidance on where to draw the line between necessary intervention and a slippery slope to serfdom. Across the ocean, America's Reader's Digest published a condensed version in April 1945, catapulting Hayek to international fame. They distributed this condensation to hundreds of thousands of readers, providing a foundational text for the emerging conservative movement. Despite its lasting fame, the text remains widely and frustratingly misunderstood today. Hayek was absolutely not an advocate of total laissez-faire capitalism or a minimal state. He explicitly supported a social safety net, arguing that a wealthy society should guarantee a basic minimum of food, shelter, and clothing for everyone. Furthermore, he endorsed state intervention to counter environmental damage, prevent industrial monopolies, and heavily regulate working hours. He even supported comprehensive social insurance against common hazards like sickness and unemployment, where private provision was impossible. His target was never the welfare state itself, nor all state regulation designed to help citizens. His target was exclusively the total state control over the means of production. He fiercely opposed central planning that sought to replace the competitive market entirely, but he wholeheartedly believed in planning for competition. He understood that a functioning market requires a strong, carefully designed legal framework to survive. Today, Hayek's warnings remain startlingly relevant. Every time we debate algorithmic state planning, wealth redistribution, or the role of government, we are still fighting over this exact fault line. The tension between the desire for collective security and the vital necessity of individual liberty continues to define our modern political landscape. Are we the masters of our social machinery or merely its servants? For Hayek, the answer was that trying to master the machine is exactly what destroys it. But if no one is at the controls, how does society actually function? That is the exact puzzle we will tackle next time. So make sure to subscribe and join us for our next episode, where we will dive into Hayek's fascinating concepts.
Central authority. It overlooks that the modern society, which I now prefer to call the extended order, which exceeds the perception of any individual mind, is based on the utilization of widely dispersed knowledge. And once you are aware that we can achieve that great utilization of available resources only because we utilize the knowledge of millions of men, it becomes clear that the assumption of socialism that a central authority can command all this knowledge is just not correct.
So what you're doing is you're turning on its head the common point one often hears from the left, that because the problems of modern society are so difficult, that they require planning. You're saying because they're so complex, they make planning impossible.
Well, I think the nicest form to put it is to say that socialism, protesting against the production for profit and not for use, objects to what makes the extended society possible. Production for use is only possible in a society where we know all the facts. But to achieve the situation where we are all working for people whom we do not know and are being supported by the work of people we do not know is made possible because we produce for profit. Profit is a signal which tells us what we must do in order to serve people whom we do not know.
Yes. Now, you and von Mises put forward this criticism in the 20s. What reaction did you get from the socialists of the day? What reply did they make to that fundamental criticism?
They were unwilling to admit the factual argument. They preferred to withdraw on the fact. This is a difference of values on which science cannot decide, Once you accept the socialist values that we must be guided by a conception of just distribution, all the factual arguments are irrelevant. Well, of course, the factual arguments prove that the just distribution is impossible unless the distributor knows all the facts. So my answer is, if the factual assumptions of socialism were correct, it would be a moral duty to aim at the just distribution. But you have to recognize you cannot do it. In fact, you can produce enough to maintain the present population of the world only because of a spontaneous process or mechanism which enables you to make use of infinitely more information than any central authority possesses.